Thank you, TW Theater, for that wonderful performance. Our next speaker is Ms. Hailey Taylor Schlitz. She is a junior in the College of Professional Education and is majoring in interdisciplinary studies. She is also a member of the TW Student Senate and was recently selected for the TW Leadership Institute. Hailey joined TW as a transfer student and is on schedule to graduate in May of 2019. She hopes to attend law school after graduating from TW and pursue a career in law, advocating for the needs of undeserved and underrepresented students in our K-12 school systems. Hailey's presentation is called Brilliance in Color. This presentation focuses on the lack of diversity and representation of minorities in our nation's K-12 gifted and talented programs. I introduce to you Ms. Hailey.
Okay. Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction. As she said, I'm Hailey Taylor Schlitz, and I am majoring in interdisciplinary studies. I'm a junior, and I'm so happy to be a part of the 2018 Pioneer Talks. My presentation is about the lack of representation and diversity in the gifted and talented programs and what we can do to fix this disparity. I would like to start my conversation today by asking everyone to think about what you see before them on stage. Do you see a young woman? Do you see a college student? Do you see someone over the age of 18? Do you see a leader? Do you see a troublemaker? Do you see someone who is the solution to a world problem? Do you see a gifted student? I ask these questions because I hope that our conversation over the next few minutes will open a longer discussion about the harsh realities students of color face in our public schools, especially when it comes to our participation in gifted and talented programs. Over the past few weeks, we have seen headlines across the nation about the release of new reports that clearly demonstrate the significant hurdles that students of color face in our public schools. This headline is from the Dallas Morning News website on April 5th, 2018. This story is about the recent release by the Government Accountability Office about the first national governmental analysis of discipline policies. The GAO report found the following. Black students were the only race in which both boys and girls were disproportionately disciplined across 6 disciplinary actions examined, which includes corporal punishments, in and out of school suspensions, expulsions, and school-related arrests. Moreover, the agency found that Black students were more likely to get suspended than their white peers in schools of all poverty levels. I wish I could share with you that the data from Texas look better than the national data released by the GAO. But just before the release of the GAO report, Austin-based Texas Care for Children released their Keeping Kids in Class report, and it too demonstrated the disproportionate rates of suspension for African American boys. The research, that is for in grades K through 2 specifically for the Keeping Kids in Class report. So that means second graders were also getting suspended and expulsed from their schools. The research notes that pattern likely reflects recent research led by Dr. Walter S. Gilliam of the Yale Child Study Center. In a controlled study where young Black and white children were actors and behaving appropriately, both early educators who are Black and white were more likely to focus on boys, particularly boys who are Black, as potentially misbehaving. Honestly, the narrative in our media focuses heavily on stories like I just mentioned. They're important and they need to be talked about, but they also generate clicks and views. The focus on suspension is important, but we fail to make the further connection to other issues that are affected by this, such as giftedness. But before we go into these connections, let's go over what giftedness is and the broader data points that paint the entire picture. What is giftedness? The National Association for Gifted Children defines it as when a child's ability is significantly above the norm for their age. But what does giftedness mean in the broader context of our schools? Well, let's look at some basic data about our schools. There are 16,758 school districts, 95,507 schools, and over 50 million students. 51.4% of our K-12 students are male, and 48.6% of our K-12 students are female. The current ethnic makeup of our schools has drastically changed over the past 10 plus years. In 2004, white students made up 58% of our K-12 students. By 2014, they were under 50%. Latino students have seen a growth from 19% in 2004 to over 25% in 2014. This trend is important because it shows that Generation Z is the bridge generation to where our public schools will be majority-minority moving forward. We see that our public schools have crossed a demographic threshold where they reflect our future. In this world where our K-12 demographics are strikingly different from that of the adult population, we start to see inherent challenges emerge. So what does this mean for our gifted education programs, and why should we be concerned? In 2016, the U.S. Department of Education released a report based on 2013-14 Civil Rights Data Collection Survey of our public schools, and found that white students made up 49% of the school population and 57% of those enrolled in gifted and talented programs. While Black and Latino students made up 42% of the school population, but only 28% of those enrolled in gifted and talented programs. Other data collections and reviews show that although African Americans make up 16.7% of the K-12 students, there are only 9.8% of those enrolled in gifted education programs. So how does this discrepancy in representation in our gifted programs affect our schools? Let's look more into that. When we look at the schools that have a higher percentage of Black and Latino students, we start to see a disturbing trend. Those Black and Latino students have less access to higher level math and science courses such as chemistry, physics, calculus, and other classes that are required by our university for acceptance, especially AP courses. These are the numbers on physics and chemistry. The same is true for Algebra 2. The reality is that we are ignoring the needs and future success of the new majority of our public schools. This sets us up for a future where it is likely the ethnicity of a student will continue to predict their educational outcome far more likely than their actual abilities. For many of these communities, they will say that our public schools have always ignored their needs and set them up to fail. And when we take into account that they will now make up the majority of our public schools and our generations in the future, we start to see the inherent challenges emerge. I am sure everyone is feeling concerned and wondering, how do we change this? I believe there's a real opportunity to adjust this program. It will be universities like TWU and their College of Professional Education that will lead the way. I feel optimistic because I can see in my classmates that they were likely to overcome the stereotypes and associated pitfalls that help create this disparity. It comes down to teaching our future teachers to understand how their projection of expectations on a student can create the outcome. When we expect students to do well, they do well. When we expect them to do bad, they do bad. Welcome to the Pygmalion effect. Research published by the Center for American Progress in 2014 shows that even before entering a classroom, some teachers have low expectations for low-income students of color. I believe that a simple change in thought will help identify and place more African American and Latino students in our gifted and talented programs. I think it is also important that we consider the makeup of our teacher workforce. A study published by the Journal of Public Administration Research and Theory in April of 2016 demonstrated that the ethnicity of a teacher has a profound effect on whether or not a student is recommended for gifted and talented programs and services. My own story and path to being classified as a gifted student is a reflection of this. My public school in Texas would not allow me to sit for the test to determine if I was gifted. My mother, an African-American woman and a highly educated physician, spent hours advocating for me, yet we were still denied. As I entered 5th grade, my interest in school started to drift away. To be honest, I found the word boring and not interesting, so I disengaged. This forced my parents to take the step to have me privately tested. When they found out that I was classified as gifted, they decided to take me out of public school and homeschool me. Homeschool allowed me to learn at my own pace. I find it liberating to be able to work in an environment specifically designed for my needs. I thrived. I graduated high school at 13, transferred to TW at 14, and I'm a 15-year-old junior who will hopefully graduate in May of 2019. I share my story because I think it is important to understand that I'm not such the outlier so many seem to think I am. One of the key differences in my ability to find academic success was my fortunate circumstances that I have my parents and family, especially my mother and grandmother, who would not accept no or we can't as the answer to my education journey. I had people who could see my potential success. This is why we must also talk about the diversity of our school teachers and administrators. Although we can work to ensure the cultural competency of all our future teachers, we must also acknowledge that a diverse teacher workforce will be crucial to breaking down barriers to academic success for all students. I would like to close by sharing what I believe is an example of how our humanity can overcome the obstacles placed before us. This headline is from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and it shares the amazing news about Carson Hugh. As the headline shares, Carson graduated TCU at 14. He is the youngest graduate in the history of TCU to earn his bachelor's degree. He is currently at TCU working on his advanced degree. Although our nation sees Carson and many other students of color as outliers, the reality is they were fortunate to find support in our education system. Just as the problem that creates these disparities is not the fault of the student or their families, the need to find a solution to them does not lie with them either. If we listen and are open to honest discussion, we can ensure that the future of education in our nation will be a strong foundation for all of the American dreams to come. Thank you for taking time to join me today for this conversation. Okay, well, I have time for any questions if you guys have any.
I don't have a question, but I want to say congratulations on your accomplishments too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know often when children aren't diagnosed, not diagnosed, but represented as gifted and talented, it's common that behavioral problems occur within gen ed classrooms without the supplemental teaching. Do you think this affects the negative portrayal that minority students see in public schools?
That's a really great question. I would say that during my experience going through, I went up until, as I said, 5th grade before I was homeschooled, and I did notice that people who, looking back, reflecting, children who could have easily been classified as gifted but were not, they weren't engaged, they weren't paying attention, and they seemed like they were misbehaving or they didn't care about school. And I think that that's really unfortunate because they have such great talent. So yeah, as you said, I think classifying a student as gifted early is really important. Anybody else? No? Well, thank you guys for having me.